Hello, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar of 2026. We're just going to give it one or two more moments before we get moving. Thanks, everyone, for being here, and I'll have a little more for you shortly. All right. I think we have enough people that we can begin the presentation. So let me switch over. Um, so again, welcome everyone. My name is Alan Barber. I'm the CEO of Accendero Software. I'll talk a little bit more about me in a second, but just briefly, I have a PhD from the University of California, San Francisco in pharmaceutical science, and I've spent about 2 decades in computational biology and biotechnology software. And before we start the formal presentation, there's two things I want to preview for the future. The first is that this is the first in our 2026 webinar series, and it's our kickoff webinar year. Throughout the year, likely every other month, we'll have additional webinars on a whole variety of topics related to scientific software. The field of scientific software is a very big field, so there'll be a lot of topics, everything from drug discovery platforms to regulatory mechanisms for manufacturing to um, the appropriate ways to scope and plan software projects in science. So we have a really full calendar, and we'll be sharing more of that as we move throughout the year. The other thing is that because we'll be running webinars every other month, the other months of the year, we'll be having software office hours. As I'll talk about during this presentation, I really believe that one of the key needs moving forward is the ability for people to work together and talk in a time of intense stress and change. And so those office hours will be held every the months where we don't have a webinar, where people can come together and work on a fun project together, and there'll be more information about that as we get closer to our office hours in March. All right, so both a little more about me and what Accendero Software does. Um, we're an 11-year-old company, and we build custom software for scientific organizations. And we have customers that range in size from startups, just a couple people, all the way down to 2 people, all the way up to global pharmaceutical companies that have tens of thousands of people. And we have a variety of ways that we support, including prototyping, production software, internal tools, regulatory submissions, regulatory regulated software for manufacturing systems. We support a wide range. And our real strength is because we're built on the idea of understanding science and understanding scientific software. We bring more capability. And more than that, we location match engineers to the companies we work with. Right now, we're solely based in the United States, and so we function and locate match engineers in the United States for both regulatory and simply utility and efficiency reasons. And on myself, I mentioned that I have 20 years. I've also worked in everything from startups to some of the largest providers in the world. For example, I was at Thermo Fisher for 3 years. So my experience spans this whole realm. And the reason that I thought about building a company like this was for the moment that we are in right now, which is that especially for companies that where software is not the primary drive, but it is critical to what they need, you have to partner with someone or some group of people who can scale that understanding at the speed and reach that's required to meet the moment. And that was true 11 years ago when we were founded, and it's far more true now. And I'll talk about that. So, what am I thinking about in 2026? There are two things that really concern me as someone who leads engineering. The first is that there's just a lot to know. There is too much to know. Um, the amount of new tools, new capabilities, the things you have to be aware of and be proficient in, the pace of change is insane. It's unbelievably challenging to keep up with. And the second is that the promises are out of control. Um, if you get on LinkedIn, if you get on read anything, the the sheer volume of what everyone is promising that you can get with new software and new technology is mind-boggling. And this puts engineers in a really difficult position where there's this dual pressure. We have to know so much. And also the pressure is, well, you just need a lot less money now, right? Than ever before because you can be so much more efficient. And that squeeze, like just talking to people I work with, talking to people in a variety of organizations, it's hitting everyone and it's very challenging to deal with. And I only see the pace of change accelerating. Early data that we've collected, we collect a tool data, suggests that in 2026, there's 16% more tools being released in the same period of time as in 2025. So things aren't slowing down. So that means that the only thing that we have, the only option available is to just get your feet underneath yourself. And this is where my approach to getting feet underneath myself really matters. There is a philosophy that I have seen kind of said around that we should adhere to of, let a thousand flowers bloom, right? Try everything, just kind of see what survives. I don't like that approach. I actually believe that it leads to a lot of intense problems. Splitting your focus, all it leads to is insufficient resources to do anything meaningful. A better path is to find things where you think you can get a good foothold and then really apply yourself because it's not going to be easy. And so you might as well make it work. So that's what this presentation is about. It's where can you, if you focus in 2026, make headway and make progress because it's feasible, right? We know it's feasible. And you can catch up and you can get your feet underneath yourself. And honestly, each of these six topics could be an hour-long webinar. What today is about, it's about giving a high level, here is where to start. Here is what to think about. And then hopefully, if you need those conversations to figure out where to move next, there are people around you and including our organization that can help get you there. Before we dive into them, I want to talk about what I mean by proven, because this is a problem with where we're at. And this is a figure from a recent Drug Discovery Today article about uptake of a variety of AI methodologies. What I want to talk about are things that people are pushing on. A lot of people are pushing on, and a lot of people are seeing value in already. And why I like to start there is that if you start building in the wake of others, it's far easier than going out on the edge alone. That's not to say you never need to go out on the edge alone. A lot of companies, often their value is really those places where they pick the edges, but you should pick very carefully where you want to be alone and in general, try to learn from everyone else, especially now with how fast everything is going. So we'll walk through each of them briefly. Again, this presentation is not going to be comprehensive. This is let's all get our feet a little wet and figure out what we're going to do next and figure out where to put our time and our money. So the first initiative that I want to talk about is research intelligence. And what I mean by research intelligence, this is the capability of an individual to work with some sort of synthetic intelligence um, to move their understanding, their knowledge forward. And it can be literature synthesis, it can be hypothesis generation, it can be experimental design. You can sit down and say, I want you to help me build this panel for this B cell flow cytometry assay. Or I got a bunch of data from this flow cytometry assay. What does it mean? Like all of those are in this realm of research intelligence. The thing that I think about research, well, there's two things to start the conversation around research intelligence. First, if we go back to this slide, you'll notice that knowledge search and scientific chatbots, those are at the very top. This is a thing that everyone is trying. And I'm sure you're aware of that, right? You go anywhere and this is all people are talking about. But what that means fundamentally is it's the fastest moving. Of the six that I talk about, this is the one where every single time you turn around, it's going to be different. So how do you operate in something where the only thing that you can count on is it being different next month? And that's where I think the importance of strong benchmarks, right? You want, and not only benchmarks, but flexibility. Go into anything involving research intelligence with the forward knowledge, whatever we are doing now, we are going to be doing something completely different in 6 months. And if you start that way, it's much easier than getting there 3 months in. And it helps set expectations very correctly because if all of the people who you're talking to and all of the people who you're delivering these solutions to understand, look, this is going to be changing all throughout the process. They agree to that and that they want that from the beginning because it will get better as you go along. Everyone will be in a better place. And the way to do that again are understand what your research intelligence systems really need to do. Have strong benchmarks for those things. Uh, I do not, most of the benchmarks that are available, especially around scientific intelligence, I don't trust many of them because many of them are so generic as to water down what you're trying to do. Instead, you want very specific benchmarks, often benchmarks very tailored to you. How well does this research intelligence provide us the ability to design these experiments? How well does it, building those and being able to really ask quickly, every month, 5 new things. Okay, let's run them through all of our benchmarks. Which one can we roll out next? Um, that sort of methodology, that sort of thinking has really helped me as I've been working in this. One thing that I want to show you just at the bottom, I did a recent newsletter on this buddy method where I talked about what the thinking behind taking something from it's one of these research intelligence systems from a prototyping stage into production and what that looks like and how I try to think about that. Um, all right. So documentation. Oh, and one other thing I want to mention, I'm sure you might have questions about all of this. There's a little question feature on the webinar. If you have questions during the webinar, please feel free to put them in there, and we'll take those all at the very end. I'm going to try to get through all these six, and then we can come back and talk through what people are confused about. All right, so documentation automation. Um, I am not going to say that documentation is fully solved, but it's really good. If you go out there and you look at the case studies for what you can do with documentation automation, it's pretty magic. Um, and I hate to, I'm a scientist and I'm someone who builds, so I hate to use the I hate to use, the term magic, but okay. Sorry, I'm just checking on something. Let me leave this up. Uh all right. So I hate to use the word magic, but it's a word that gets thrown around, especially with these sorts of things, and especially in the case of documentation automation. So this is a place where it's reasonable to try to actually really push to look at the workflows that are around you and say, okay, are we touching documents manually? And if so, how can we have that be done completely automatically? And the best case study that I've seen around this is the Novo Nordisk on Claude case study. And the reason I really like this case study is that the gain that they suggest that they got is very well tied to the technology that they were using in a very challenging and realistic environment. And so it's worth looking at if you want to think, okay, because a lot of the case studies, especially for things around because there's so many documentation automation systems right now, can get a little bit, they can be overhyped. So I like this one because it's very real. And that, I like when things feel real. All right, so collaborative AI assisted data analysis. This is actually another area that's coming along very well. But what I will say about this is different organizations handle this very differently. This is one place where one size fits all is very hard to suggest because usually different organizations have very strong opinions about how all of their data needs to be collected and also how people need to be able to access it. So, for example, the proof point that I have listed here, which was a cool little demo using Claude and uh, an IDE, very easy, very cool to set up if you're a startup. I don't know how well that would work if you're in a larger organization. Um, but it is worth thinking, right? If scientists are still coding in 2026 and they're not scientists who really enjoy the process of coding and especially the process of debugging, there are probably other options and they can, and none of the code usually that they're developing to do one-off analysis, that's not production code. So if it's dodgy at best, no harm. Rapid prototyping. Um, I do not like the term vibe coding. It's not something that I use in my vocabulary. And the reason is that coding is a thing that you do. It is not what you are trying to accomplish. So what is a thing that you might try to accomplish? Releasing a system, prototyping a system, testing a system, right? All of these things are ends. And so that's where I like to focus. And a lot of people, when they talk about vibe coding, are actually talking about rapid prototyping. Um, but so that's where my pedantic, like let's use the right words, um, comes into play. But this is also I am incredibly impressed with where the tools are right now for rapid prototyping. In general, right now, I think it's possible to prototype almost every idea that's reasonably good into something that's only 80% there, but that's okay. Because what that prototype gives you is it gives you the understanding of is this something we even want to take forward? Is this something that even works and people like, right? If everybody looks at it, you prototyped it and they say, actually, no thanks, I hate it. It's very easy to just throw it away because it didn't cost you that much to prototype it in the first place. A practice that I've gotten into with prototyping that I really, really love is having prototyping working sessions, which is I'll gather the requirements before with a project. We'll go into a session. We'll push the requirements in. We'll kind of see what sort of user experience is coming out, and then I'll work with users to say, how could we make this better? And have that collaborative, what is it that you're looking for all together? And that's a really great experience. It's worked very well, and helped build systems that meet people where they are much faster and really meet the moment of where we are right now. Software coding with agentic support. This is a minefield, and I know it's a minefield. So I want to be cautious in talking about where we are and where we're not. Um, it's changing very fast. The tools are very good, um, but they're not good across the board. There are some things they can do, and for example, like writing unit tests, right? Or another area where we've had a lot of success is building UI, right? Throwing requirements into Claude Code and say build all the UI for this, or for where I stood before, like take this prototype, build all the production UI, like that can go very well. Let's talk about areas where it doesn't go very well. Infrastructure, right? I want to launch this system in the best way possible on AWS. That's a much harder case. And right now, we've really struggled with the tools getting there. So my recommendation is something like what, and this is in this Gen AI and scientific coding white paper that we've done. Instead of thinking of coding as a monolith, think of tasks, think of goals, think of tools, right? Here are things we need to do. Here are the potential tools that we have to do it. How well are they working? And then again, just like the previous example, where it's more about changing often, keeping yourself updated and understanding what you need to do. Same thing here, right? Instead of trying to make Gen AI one thing for all things, instead think of it as different tools, and all of them function differently and have different strengths and pros and cons, and where can you apply them, and how can you apply them, and how well are they working, and in what places do you need to do something different. All right. Finally, integrated machine learning. Um, what do I mean by integrated machine learning? There's so many models right now, and it has never been easier to build models. I've been building models for decades now, and it is so much easier. If I wanted a vision model today, like completely different. But you still need to connect those models to the people. And the faster you can go around the cycle of making that model better, the faster you're going to be able to actually build what you want. And I want to bring this back to this idea of prototyping, right? So a couple slides before, and let's talk about um, where all of these technologies can really, for a lack of a better word, be incredibly synergistic, right? The idea that, okay, we need to build a user experience that allows our users to understand exactly where our models are at every single day and that meets them where they're at. Well, that's going to require continuous prototyping of the mechanisms to deliver those experiences to them. And so you have to put all of these various things together. And then what you can end up with is speed and efficiency and velocity that actually meets the moment. And, we have examples of being able to take to turn the crank between updating the model, having the user provide feedback, and then being able to update the experience so that they can provide additional data, from weeks to days, by using these sorts of mechanisms. And that allows them to move much faster and make much more powerful science much quicker. All right. So that was a bit of a whirlwind. We only had, maybe 20 minutes talking about all that. And I know that. So let's talk about practical places to start. And what I think I'd really like people to take away from the best place to start is, even if you can't do six, think about two that would play really well together. For example, I just mentioned the rapid prototyping and the rapid iteration on machine learning, right? Those two feed each other. Or maybe you need faster coding along with find those places where the pieces all fit together into your, and then push as hard as you can in those areas, and then bring the rest on as you can. Um, that's often challenging, but that's where you get the biggest push forward, and it's where um, you can actually change, the way that you work and the way that the people around you. And I've seen a lot, like this is the strategy I've taken for myself, which is focus. Don't seed everything, really trying to figure something out before moving on. And that works a lot better, I found. All right. So keep the conversation going. Uh, if, again, I mentioned this was all very fast, and we went through this very quickly. A couple of ways to keep developing these ideas, to keep pushing on these things. And the first one is office hours. We'll be working on these sort of tasks together, you know, in a much more deep and comprehensive way where we're, actually trying to build something. I find webinars are really poor places to learn how to build something. The best way to learn how to build something is to try to build it, and to try to do it and to look at what's crashing. Um, Again, upcoming webinars every other month. We have strategy sessions that are available. That link will be available as part of the follow-up resources that we provide. So if you would like to sit down and think through, again, so many of these things need the context of the organization to actually be able to make really strong um, recommendations. So that ability to sit down and think through problems is perhaps the most important. And finally, the resources that we talked about today, they're already available, all of them, there's links. And um, in additional communications that will come out after this webinar, those links will be provided. And if you would like any other materials, background data, other case studies, what have you, please feel free to reach us out to us, and we can help guide you on the path to having a much better time in 2026. Where hopefully, well, I already know things will go just as fast as they were in 2025, but maybe we can all survive it, and that would be good for everyone. All right, so I am going to pause this, and then Madeline, are there questions that have come in? And feel free, like as we start doing questions, if you have questions, please feel free to use the Zoom mechanism to post questions, and then Madeline will read them off.
Awesome. Thanks, Alan. So we did have a few questions come in. The first one is, what do you do when you are in an organization where common platform and common data initiatives make prototyping difficult?
Okay, when you're thinking about how to handle large organizations, um, I want to reframe this question into a question of how to help people be agile. Because whenever we're talking like everybody wants to do it the same way, and you want to do it a little bit different because you want to prototype. And the thing that you should do is find a place. You have to reach out to the people around you, find something that you can try and test that the organization is going to allow you to have some freedom and give all on your own, which is challenging, right? I mean, I worked at Thermo Fisher Scientific. I'm very well aware of the challenge of getting a little bit of space for yourself. But I mean, that's the world we live in, right? Fundamentally, if we don't have a place to test and practice and find the better way forward, we're never going to find it. So get yourself a little space where you can do it, show people how exciting it is, how many cool things you're doing, and then worry about trying to manage all of the politics of what to do with the monolith that you're supposed to build into.
Thanks, Alan. Question number two that we had come in. What do you say to managers who have been convinced by the most unbelievable ROI claims out there?
Right. So I've had this conversation with a lot of people. It's actually one of the things that I get the most, where anytime you look around, everything is so magical and wonderful. And how come you need a whole team of engineers when shouldn't the technology be doing that all for you? This is why fundamentally I've started using tools like the registry and other mechanisms where you go in and you start talking about, instead of trying to completely talk them down, um, you start the conversation with, well, let's see what it will actually do here, right? Instead of just, taking it on face value, let's try it. Let's build this registry. Let's test these things out. Let's get a sense if any of this is going to work. And people will come usually. I mean, not in every organization, but people will usually come along with you and then you can start to show them, okay, well, it works here. You were right. And over here, it's not working at all. You were wrong. And that way you can slowly negotiate your way to a place where everyone is, managing.
Okay, this might be our last one. If anyone else has a question, it's not too late. Feel free to throw it in. Okay, Alan, which machine learning models for biotech have you seen the most success over the last year?
Okay, and there was a reason that I didn't go deep into which models in the machine learning. One, because the models change constantly, and also it really depends on the organization. Um, if I had to rank all the models of like which ones I trust the most to which ones I think are the furthest, like the ones that need the most work, anything involving structural biology, those models have been around for decades. I mean, when I started my undergraduate work, I was working in machine learning and structural biology. So, you know, and now they've got all these generative stuff, and those models are old. Like the new models are new, but all of the mechanisms and the way to understand them and the practice, it's all been around forever. So, structural biology, good. Chemical, cheminformatics and chemical stuff, it's maybe. Genomics, I need to see a lot more. There's been so much progress, but I've read a lot of the literature and it's not quite as um, s- stellar, right? So I think that might be a place to think. Anytime you can do a tailored model for a diagnostic, those all work great. I was doing those back, right out of grad school. So yeah, those are those are great. And then the other one that I should mention that I definitely needs a little more work, anything involving clinical data. Um, A lot of potential. I need to see more to really understand how far along it is. Anything else? Any other questions?
I have not seen anything else come in.
All right. Well, I really appreciate the time that everyone took to think about this today. And as always, if there are other uh, questions or issues, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much. We will talk later.